welcome to Demo 2 of OnShape, where we're going to be getting into a few more details with sketching. In particular, we're going to be looking at the different constraints and how we actually add constraints in. So you'll see that in some detail today. You'll also see a few other sketch tools, but today we will only be working on sketches. So we will not be doing anything in 3 dimensions yet. That is yet to come. So let's go ahead and get started by creating a new document. And we need to follow our proper naming convention when we're doing this. So if you remember the name, you start with your class name, underscore, the document name. So for this one, it's going to be Demo 2, no spaces, underscore, and then your last name. So make sure you have this proper naming convention. Super important to remember. If you don't have this correct, you will get points taken off.
So after we've created that document, then we can go in and hide the front and the right planes, because remember, when we're sketching, we don't need that third dimension. When we extrude in our next lesson, we will need to look at those planes. But for right now, we only need the top plane. And to view our top plane, we'll click on top. To create a new sketch plane, we'll go ahead and click Sketch. And then it'll ask us to choose a sketch plane, and we're going to write on the top plane. So we click there, and now we should see sketch 1. Let's go ahead and rename this to Demo 3. And then remember, if you click check, that is going to confirm the sketch, and it's going to go away. So don't do the check. If you do the check, it's no problem. You'll see Demo 3 over here to the left, and all you have to do is double click on that to pull it back up. But all you have to do, if you are confirming your change in title, is just click outside the box, and you'll see that Demo 3 change. And now we can hide the top plane, move this little box out of the way, and start our sketch for Demo 3. Okay, so like I said, today we're going to be looking at constraints and dimensions. So if you're thinking about the tools, or if you're looking at your tools, if you have a big computer, all your constraints are going to be nice and listed out here. If you have a smaller screen, then you'll see this drop-down menu. We're not going to go through all of these constraints today. Some of these you wouldn't really use until you came up with some maybe more advanced designs. But we are going to talk about coincident. We're going to talk about concentric. We're going to briefly touch on tangent. Definitely talk about horizontal, vertical, perpendicular, and then equal. And that'll be all of the constraints we'll talk about. And then the last thing I'm going to go over is dimensions. And this is basically just putting sizes on your different shapes and lines. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the first constraint, and this is the coincident constraint. So if you read there, it says, constrain 2 or more entities to share the same location in a sketch. Pre-select 2 or more lines, curves, center, or endpoint, and then click the coincident constraint tool. Okay, so it looks like I need to then first create 2 figures. So maybe I'll create a line, and remember, to get out of the tool, press escape. And maybe I'll create a circle. Okay, so if I want this line, or this point on this line to touch this circle, I would use the coincident constraint. So if I want to do that, if I press escape here to get out of my circle tool, because I'm currently on a circle tool. So if I click something here, it would create a new circle. I don't want that. Escape. So it's to select the 2 entities. So I'm going to select this point with this circle right here, and then if I click the coincident, look at that, it brings them together. Okay, and now the cool thing about this is I can move this line around, right? Or I could even maybe move this point around this circle, but it's always going to be touching this circle because I added in that coincident constraint. Okay, we can do the same thing with lines. So if I wanted to maybe connect a line, so if I wanted to connect this line to this line here, again, we select those 2 points and do the coincident constraint, and now we have these connected lines. So if we move these things, they're always going to stay connected. All right, so that's one of the easiest ones, and it's often prompted. So if I, let's say, created a line here, this next line is automatically going to have the coincident constraint. So when I click this here and I go back, actually, if you want to see all the constraints in a sketch, if you go to your little sketch check plane here, this option show constraints will show you. And if you look, you have this coincident constraint. So that means that this line is going to be connected to this line at all times. Now, if I delete that constraint, which I can do by clicking on it and deleting it, well, now I can move this line around and they're not going to be connected anymore. Okay, cool. So I'm going to leave this show constraints on just for this demo to show you it. If you leave that on at all times, it's probably going to get a little annoying. You'll see so many constraints, but I'm going to leave that on for right now, just so you can see it for this demo. Okay, so we just went through coincident. The next thing we'll go through is concentric. Okay, so let's say that I have two different sized circles, one here, tiny one here, and I want to put this smaller circle inside of the bigger circle. So that's where you would use the concentric. So basically, it's kind of like the coincident constraint, except it's for circles. It's used for circles. So if I click the concentric constraint, if I choose my two circles, you'll see that, bam, they move, and now they have the same center. The cool thing about this is that if I escape and I'm just in my selecting tool, now I can move this whole figure together. I can individually move, change the radius of each of the circles, so I can make this like a little cup, or I can make it a lot bigger, however you want to do it. But that is your concentric constraint. So concentric means having the same center. We can do that for circles. We can also do that for arcs. So let's say that we made an arc. Let's see, make sure. I don't want to make the mistake. Starting point, end point. Radius, no, I don't want that. Center point arc. Okay, there we go. So I can add in the concentric constraint here with an arc as well. So let's see if we did that. Concentric. And okay, so now this arc has the same concentric constraint. So it will have the exact same center as these other two arcs do. And we can move it around if we want to move it around, but it's going to keep that same center. Okay, so that's concentric. That means have the same center, used for circles and for arcs. Okay, next we're going to talk about tangent. So if you look, it says tangent. It constrains two curves to be tangent by selecting the sketch entities and then selecting the tangent tool. So if we had a circle here, and we had a circle here, and we want these circles just to be touching each other. Okay, that's what tangent means. It means their curves are touching at one point. That's where we would use the tangent tool. So we would need to, remember escape. So I was accidentally still on my circle tool when I clicked, and that brought me a new circle. Don't want that. Escape gives me out of my tools. But again, back to the tangent. So if I want these two circles to be just touching at one point, I need to select them both first, and then I need to go to my tangent tool, and you'll see now these are touching. So I can move my circle around, or I can make it bigger or smaller. Do the same thing with this other one, but they're always going to be touching around the outside because I added that tangent constraint in. Okay, so that is tangent. If you want to do that with two circles, make them touch, that would be your tangent constraint. Okay, so let's go ahead then on to the next one. So we're talking about horizontal. Horizontal, this happens quite a bit on automatically. So if you look, when you are creating new lines or new features, OnShape is kind of smart. So let's say I have this line that I just created right here. Create this line, or I'm about to create a new line here. And so this is my origin point. If you look, OnShape automatically thinks before I'm even clicking, it's saying like, oh, well, do you want to be coincident with the center point? So if I create a line right now, that line is going to be, if you look, coincident with the center point. Now, it looks like you even put one more constraint in. I put this horizontal constraint. So I can't even move this vertically at all because it automatically put in this horizontal constraint. Now, if I wanted to delete that, that's no problem. I can just delete these constraints. I'll delete all my horizontal constraints. And now I can move this around. You can see that OnShape likes to add in constraints automatically. And if you don't pay attention to it or you don't delete them, then you're going to run into issues. Okay. So look, if I even put this here, this snaps to a vertical constraint. So now if I try to move this side to side, I can't do that at all. If I want to move side to side, I would have to delete the vertical constraint. And now I can move it around again. Okay. So again, that's the auto feature. And through the auto feature, you just saw the vertical and horizontal constraint. So what a vertical constraint does is it locks two entities in or 2 points in the same vertical position. So if I lock this in vertically, you can see that this point is in the same vertical position as the center point. If I delete that, then I can move that around. But if I want to lock it back in vertically, I could do that there. Now you can see that there's another constraint. So if I delete the vertical, if I move this horizontal, there's this horizontal constraint, and that again, kind of similarly, but it would lock us in horizontally. So it means that this point would be in the same horizontal position as the center point. Okay. So we could do that with lines. We could also do that maybe with like a figure. So if we wanted to make a figure and we wanted to make it have the same, like start in the same position as this line, you can see that before even creating the figure, if we hover over that point and we just move up, it's automatically going to create the vertical constraint. So it added that in right there. So with the center point rectangle, the center point of this rectangle has a vertical constraint with this center point of this line. So I can move this up and down, but I can't move it left or right at all because I added that constraint. If I delete this vertical constraint, now I can move this. Looks like I have another vertical constraint. If I delete those vertical constraints, now I can move it around as freely as possible. But if you hover right back over there, it will automatically lock back in and it'll give you that vertical constraint. And now look at this. The only thing I can do is move up and down. Okay. So you really have to pay attention to the automatic features. But the vertical and the horizontal constraints are kind of self-explanatory. So they'll lock any point in with another point at a vertical position or horizontal position. And then just pay attention to those automatic ones. They do come up quite a bit whenever you're creating new lines for your figures. All right, so the last constraint that I'm going to show you is the equals constraint. And in order for us to use the equals constraint, we actually have to give some dimensions for one of our lines first. So to give dimensions to a line, so to give it like a certain length, all we have to do is use the dimension tool. So we click dimension, and if we want to set like a certain dimension for just a line, all you have to do is just make sure the line is highlighted, and then click one time. And if you click, you'll see that it comes up with the automatic dimension that it is, but we can give it something else. So maybe if we wanted it to be 2 inches, we could put in 2 because that's the unit of my document right now. I didn't change that. I need to change that. So let me do that right now. Workspace units should be in millimeters. All right, back to the demo. So 2 inches is 50.8 millimeters. If I want to make this 100 millimeters now, do that, 100 millimeters, and that's there. The nice thing is OnShape can convert for you. So if you want to make it 2 inches, it'll do that, but it'll just change it to millimeters. So 2 inches is 50.8 millimeters. Okay, so we put the dimension in, and now let's go ahead and create maybe a text box. Hello. Okay, so if we want this text to be just as long as this line right here, that's where we'll use the equal constraint. So because we've already set this, because this line is 50.8 inches, or 50.8 millimeters or 2 inches, if I want this hello to be 2 inches, I'll go there and then click on top below, and now you can see that this is 2 inches. Now it looks like I have a vertical constraint somewhere because I can't move this left or right. So let me go and see where that's at. I want to be able to move it left or right. Oh, sorry, horizontal constraint. Let's go ahead and delete that. And now I can drag and move my text and show you that that is what the equals constraint does. It just makes it the equal distance. Okay. So constraints, they can be a little bit frustrating, but I promise if once you continue to work with them, you'll realize that they are really, really helpful. And there's something that you have to be able to do before you extrude anything, because if you don't have these constraints and you have gaps in your lines, then you won't be able to extrude those figures. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into just a little drawing today. I'm in the Christmas spirit. The last one I had to do a Christmas ornament. I saw some amazing Christmas ornaments. You're going to see the reason why we're doing all of this. when it comes to our project. But today what we're going to do is we're going to build a little snowman. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is build the snowballs, and we're going to make sure that the snowballs are all vertically aligned. So we're going to use the vertical constraint when we're creating these center point circles. So we'll start with the center point circle. And if I want them all to be lined up with the center, which I do, I'll just go ahead and already set up that vertical constraint. So now my bottom snowball is going to be vertically aligned with the center point. Now, if I want to make my second snowball the same thing, I can hover over either the center point in the center, or I can hover the center point in my circle to make sure that those are vertically aligned. And now I can make my second snowball. And I'm going to make these overlap just a little bit so we can use the trim tool. I know that I taught you that last time, but we didn't get to practice it as much. So today we'll use the trim tool. So we'll make these overlap. And then we'll do the same thing for the head. We'll just make sure that it is vertically aligned with our center point and with our circle. And voila. Ooh, that's too big of a head. That's okay. So we can change the dimensions of the head, and we'll do that shortly. I think that's a little bit too big of a head. Yeah. So let's go ahead. You can see that these are all vertically aligned. So I can move these up and down, but I cannot move these left and right. And that is what you want. You want to have them vertically aligned with the center. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead then and add in some dimensions for these body parts. So for the head, let's start with that. So the head we already said was a little bit too big. So we'll start by dimensioning that. If you just click the circle on the outside, so you click dimension and then click the circle on the outside, it'll give you these lengths. So 27 seems like it's too big. Maybe let's start with, let's see what 20 millimeters looks like. Whoa, okay. All right, so that shrunk that down. And that looks a little bit, we'll see. So you can see that it shrunk these other ones down. We haven't given our other things dimensions yet. So once we go and we give this bigger circle dimension, it'll move as well. So if this is 21 right now, we want it to be bigger than 21. So let's set it to be like, I don't know, let's go 30, see what that looks like. Ooh, 30 way too big. Okay, no problem. We can change that. How about 25? Okay, that looks better. And then let's dimension our last circle. I think 30 would probably be appropriate. I think that looks good. Okay, so you can see we have these overlapping lines, and obviously for a snowman, we definitely are not going to want these overlapping lines. So to get out of our dimension tool, because we are going to be using the trimming tool, press escape. And now we can use the trim tool to trim out just the overlapping inside lines. Let's see, will it look better if we take that out? Yeah, I think it looks better. Take that out too. So we'll take out those other ones too. All right, cool. So we have a pretty good looking snowman so far. We've already set the dimensions for our circles. We know that our circles are all vertically aligned. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to give our snowman some features. So I want to give him some arms and then maybe some eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Actually, let's go ahead and start with the mouth. There's a couple things that we can do. So let's zoom in on the face here. And I want to make a arc that is concentric with this center point of this circle, because I think that that's where I'm going to put the nose. So actually, let's go ahead and start and put the nose, bam, right there in the center. So when we click on that center point, it is automatically going to give us a concentric or coincident point with that. So we'll have a nice circular nose. But then I want an arc, so I want a center point arc that has the same center as this nose. So if I go out, you can see that it starts to build this arc. And then I need to click where I want the smile to start. So I think I want it to start about right here. And I'll make it go to about, well, let's see. I can make it go to the same vertical height, I believe. Maybe not. We'll add that in here in just a second. So we'll do horizontal. And we'll make this horizontal with this. Then we have a perfectly level smile. Okay, so then this is great if we have like a two-dimensional sketch, but if we eventually want to turn this into a 3D sketch, So we're going to use the offset feature to make this smile an actual mouth. So if you remember, the offset feature is right here, offset. So if we click offset and we offset this line, it's taking us way down here. Well, I don't want to do that. I want to be on the inside, and I think that's good right there, about 1 millimeter. And then remember, to lock it in, you just need to click on the outside of the sketch, and we're locked in. Now we can set the dimension, so 1 millimeter is perfect, and press enter. Okay, now to finish off this smile, I have to connect these lines. So I need to make a line that is coincident with the upper part of the mouth and the lower part of the mouth. So if I click on line, you can see that this automatically snaps, and there we go. There's one line, and then we can do snaps, and there's another one. So we've got a nose, we've got a mouth. I think we need to add some arms, and we need to add some eyes. So if we're thinking about arms and eyes in a snowman, I think the best way to do that would be to make them symmetric. So if you remember last time, we learned about this mirror tool. And in order to have the mirror tool, if you remember, we need a mirror line. So we have to create this construction line that we're going to mirror our images over. So we're going to do the same thing on the left side of this as we are the right side. So to create that construction line, remember, if you're out of your tools, if you click on line and then construction, we want to make this construction line vertical, going right through our snowman. So if we click, we can see if we hover over the center point line, it's automatically adding in the vertical constraint, which is what I want. So that's perfect. And then we'll just send that vertically, so you can see the vertical constraint there. Perfect. And now we'll press escape, and we have a mirror line that we can do some eyes, maybe some arms going across. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the eyes. For eyes, we'll do a center point circle. And I think, about right here looks good for an eye. All right, so I want to make this symmetric. So to make this circle go on the other side, remember, to get out of your tools, press escape. To make this mirror over the other side, we use the mirror. We need to select the mirror line first, and then we can choose the entity to mirror over there. And look at that. Our Frosty has symmetric eyes. Looking pretty cool. All right. So then the last thing that we would want to add in here is some arms. And so again, to add arms, we want to make sure that the lines that we have going out are coincident with our circle of the snowman. So when we choose line, you can see that when we hover over this, our coincident constraint comes up. And so now we can click, and so that line will always be touching our point, or touching the snowman right there. Okay, so we've done one of our lines out there, but now we need to make some fingers on the snowman. So we'll go ahead and click to make. Whoops. What just happened? Let me delete this. Something weird happened there. Okay, line. Go out. All right, so we have this coincident. It's touching here, but like I said, we want to make some little fingers on our guy. So we'll go ahead and just click one. We'll escape, and then we'll create some more lines. 2, and we'll create some more lines. 3. All right, so if you can see, we have these lines here, these 3 lines, and mine look pretty similar, pretty equal. But look, you can see there's one thing. So this right angle is added in. Actually, that looks kind of nice because then this splits perfectly. So I'll leave that constraint in. But if we want to make these fingers all the same length, remember, we can use the equals constraint. So if we use the equals constraint and we click on 2 lines and then we click on the last one, now you can see that all of these are the same length. So if I make one of my fingers bigger, all the fingers get bigger, and there we go. Okay, so, whoa, it looks like that hand is a little bit too big, or the arm's a little bit too big. Whoa. And then play around with it a little bit. It's a nice thing that we have these constraints. Move these fingers I'm going to delete this right angle constraint. It's kind of annoying actually. So now when I move this, I can move these freely. Okay, there we go. All right, so then the last thing I need to do is, so you can see I have all of these coincident constraints because these are all these fingers are touching the arm at that point there. I have the coincident constraint there. I'm going to hide the constraints. Remember to hide and show the constraints. You can click on that. But just because I want to make this mirror happen relatively easily, I'll click on the mirror image, choose my mirror line, and then remember you can choose any of the elements. And now if you notice, once we're done with that, if we go over here, all of these have the mirrored constraints. So these are going to do the same thing as we do over here. So if we move this line down here, whoa, you can see that that moves on both sides. So if we want to make our arm a little bit bigger, we can do that, and that'll do that on both sides because we have the mirror constraint. We wanted to delete that, so if we didn't want that to be there, then we can just delete these mirror constraints. And if you delete the mirror constraint, then now if you change something over here, oops, you must still have, oops. There's a lot of them on there. I think I'm going to delete them all. No, maybe not. Okay, so now, yes, you can see now that I've deleted the mirror constraint, I can move the one about and it doesn't change the other one. But usually if you're going to make symmetric figures, you want the mirror constraint to be on there. So you would definitely want this to be mirrored up. All right, so there's Frosty. There's your Frosty the Snowman. I know that that was a little bit longer of a tutorial today, but I can tell you that the constraints and dimensions are extremely important. So to submit this final Frosty sketch, you're going to click check on your sketch. Remember, now you can move around. You can see, oh, it's Frosty. Cool, cool. But then what you need to do is you need to share that with me. So my name, email, ANDESWITD@phs.org. Make sure that you have that email correct. You're not having to share with the wrong person. And then share. And once that's shared, then you're good for your check for understanding. And all you'll need to do is replicate the snowman. You're going to make a little snowman family for your homework tonight. See you later.